is an entity started by Jim Newberger, thank you. And he handed it off to us, and our goal is to elect conservatives at the local level of government. So we focus on county commissioners, mayor, city council, school board, etc. So tonight we're here, we have Doug Wardlow. He's going to be doing his podcast live for us, which is awesome. And we have Senator Mark Cran doing a legislative update after that. We are looking for free will donations towards our PAC. We're raising money to help conservatives get elected at the local level of government. We have a county commissioner candidate I just contacted the other day. He's a super big conservative up by Ely. He's running for Lake County commissioner. Awesome guy. So we want to be able to get ads for these guys, signs for these guys, literature for these people. So this is kind of a grassroots movement. We've been building this thing big time, and we're hoping to grow it bigger and bigger across the state. So we do have some plans coming up here in the future to grow this thing, but we're taking baby steps little by little, raising it little by little, and go from there. We do have a sign-up list over there. If we get your name and email address, and once I get the email all locked in here and stuff, well, you guys will get updates for what we're doing in the future here. And we do have pocket constitutions you guys can take home, because apparently our state and representatives don't know what on the other side of the aisle, I should say, don't know what the Constitution is, so we obviously know that. There's some literature there for the Forgotten Heroes Range and Retreat as well. So thank you guys all for coming tonight. I hope you enjoy.
Thank you, Jed. I'm Doug Wardlow. Just want to first of all thank you all for being here. Thank you, Jed, for organizing this, and Bill and Tony, and thanks to the Minnesota Conservative PAC. Wonderful to be here. Now, I also want to thank you for those of you who supported me in the campaign for Attorney General last cycle and the cycle before that. We didn't quite get there this last time, but we gave it a good try, and we fought hard for our founding principles and for the rule of law. Now, we're talking a lot about that in the Constitution tonight. So we're recording an episode by podcast, and if you haven't seen the podcast, please go ahead and go to YouTube, or Rumble. We're going to get kicked off YouTube soon, I'm sure. They've warned us, and they've taken down one episode where we talked about COVID because it wasn't, it was expressing unapproved opinions. Right? But go to YouTube, go to Rumble, and sign up for that. Subscribe to it. We're trying to spread the word about it. The idea of the podcast is called Founding Principles with Doug Wardlow. And it's called that because I think that the only way we can save our country is to get back to our founding principles. Those are the principles that undergird the Constitution, the principles enunciated in the Declaration of Independence, the principles that our country has really strayed from over the course of the last, century. The only way to get back to those founding principles is if we all work hard to speak truth, and I'll be talking about that too. Let's spread the word about the podcast. Sign up on Rumble. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, Founding Principles with Doug Wardlow. So I'm going to do something here that's a little bit different because this is for an episode. So we're taping it live, and then we're going to put the episode out there on Monday. And first, I'm going to just read a short intro. That'll be kind of the intro for the video. Then I'll pause, and then I'll go into my main remarks. Got some prepared remarks here. And then after the remarks, I ask that you hold questions till the end. I'll have some time for questions and answers. And then we'll wrap up, and then Senator Grant will come up and do his thing, and then after that we can do some questions and answers with both of us. Sound good? Very good. All right, so now I'm going to record the little video intro. So this will seem kind of strange. I'll be talking to the camera, and but you'll get the idea here. All right, we all set? Okay. Today we are in Carlton, Minnesota, just south of the port city of Duluth on Lake Superior. Talking to patriots who live in this beautiful part of the state of Minnesota about the crisis that is currently facing this state, the state of Minnesota, and our nation. After Minnesota Democrats took complete control of the legislature and the governorship this past election cycle, they pushed through a spate of radical legislation designed to attack life, to attack liberty, to attack everything sacred about our country and about our state, to attack God himself. Meanwhile, at the federal level, the Biden administration is prosecuting President Trump, the first time that a sitting president has ever prosecuted a former president of the United States. That points to the left's true objective in all of this, in the nationwide battle that is raging right now, a battle between good and evil. What is their objective? They want to tear down this country and replace it with an authoritarian socialist dystopia. I'm Doug Wardlow, and this is Founding Principles. Good? All right, so there's the intro. Right? Now we're going to go into the remarks. All right. We find ourselves at a critical point in the history of our state and of our nation, a critical juncture that will determine, at the very least, the prospects for future prosperity for ourselves and for generations to come. History. We've got to look at history as our guide. And it's sad that more people don't do that, right? It's not taught in our public schools. But we need to look to history for our guide. History demonstrates that more often than not, we can only discern these junctures, these critical moments, these pivotal moments, in retrospect, if at all. And if you think about it, that makes sense. The point of no return comes before the crisis fully hits, obscured by the rapidly moving events of the day. So, on January 10th, 49 BC, Julius Caesar led his legions across the Rubicon and began his march on the capital of the Roman Republic, breaking Rome's ancient law forbidding any general from bringing a standing army into Italy proper. Just 26 years later, the Roman Republic was dead, and Caesar's posthumously adopted son, Octavian, became Caesar Augustus, securing complete tyrannical power over what was then the new Roman Empire. When Caesar crossed the Rubicon in 49 BC, things had actually been going quite well for Rome for quite some time. About 80 years before, Rome's main enemy, Carthage, had been completely destroyed. External threats had been eliminated. The economy was booming. But the good times did not last. No longer confronted by danger abroad, Romans relaxed and gave themselves up to the pursuit of luxury and personal ambition. The government began giving away bread. They instituted the grain dole. Publicly sponsored gladiatorial games became more and more common. Morality deteriorated. While bread and circuses kept the masses satiated, the political leaders in Rome became more and more corrupt, abusing their offices, putting power and personal gain over the rule of law. Eventually, as the rule of law decayed, the legal system was unleashed by the corrupt leaders in power. It was unleashed against the people who were out of power, against their political enemies. You know, this is a tale that is a cautionary tale for ourselves, for our American Republic. Think about this. Caesar, who lost his immunity from prosecution when his governorship of Gaul ended, so he was up in Gaul, France, and conquered all these different tribes, and he headed back down towards Italy with his legions. When his governorship up there ended under Roman law, his immunity from prosecution ended. And he knew that his political enemies were preparing to drag him into court. And that is why he decided to cross the Rubicon and march on Rome with his legions and break the law and go ahead and do that. It was the beginning of the end. But even as Caesar crossed the Rubicon, and even when Caesar was murdered in the Senate House 5 years later, Romans had no idea that their entire world was about to become undone. They had no idea that their freedoms were soon to be entirely dissipated, or that the powers of their Senate and the popular assembly would entirely disappear. And if a few Roman senators did occasionally warn, like Cicero, that the Republic was in danger, no one anticipated that a brand new political order would entirely and completely replace the old one. But that's exactly what happened. The old Republican order was torn down, and a new, terrible authoritarian order emerged. So here's the question you should consider. At what point did moral degeneracy, political corruption, and the decay of the rule of law guarantee the Roman Republic's demise? It's difficult to say. But the point is that there was such a point of no return. There was a fateful fork in the road where only one path should be taken. The virtues which made Rome the most free and prosperous republic to ever exist, save the American Republic today, were abandoned in favor of satisfying ephemeral desires. Desires for wealth and power dominated the elites, and desires for free food and entertainment and luxury dominated the masses. And like I said, the fall of the Roman Republic is a cautionary tale, one that is particularly relevant today, as we struggle to retain or regain those virtues which help make America, our civilization, the greatest one to ever exist. Just as there was a point of no return for Rome, America is fast approaching its own point of no return, or perhaps we are already past it. Perhaps that point is already in the rearview mirror. Indeed, that's what the political prosecution and political persecution of President Trump suggests. The Democrats have crossed the Rubicon. They are marching on Rome, and nothing will ever be the same. Never before in American history has a sitting president prosecuted a former president. President Biden appointed a special counsel to do his dirty work, a blatant attempt to create political cover and the illusion of independence. And that Biden-appointed special counsel charged President Trump with 37 felony counts related to the alleged mishandling of classified documents. The whole thing is ridiculous. No matter that, as president, Trump had complete authority to declassify documents. That right there should be an entire defense. He doesn't have to do anything special to declassify documents. He can just decide a document is declassified, and then it is, because he's the president. Only the president can do that. Mike Pence, he had classified documents in his house. He didn't have the power to declassify them. He's the one that should be charged, not President Trump. But no matter that President Biden, then Vice President Biden, was storing classified documents in his garage in Delaware, apparently not even locked, during the same time period when Hunter Biden was living in that same house. And during the same time period when Hunter Biden was working with entities that have ties to the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. And during the same time period when money was flowing from CCP-linked entities to Biden family members. No matter. And no matter that Hillary Clinton undoubtedly violated the Espionage Act with her private email server. That wasn't prosecuted either. You see, the Biden administration and the radical left have now decided and declared that the law is merely a tool and nothing more. A tool to be used to fight their political enemies. A tool to be used to further their political agenda. If the law gets in the way of their agenda, they will ignore it. If it furthers their agenda, well, then they're going to enforce it to its letter. And when you have selective prosecution and enforcement like that, it destroys the rule of law. So we must rally around President Trump and defeat this political persecution and abuse of the law. But I'm afraid that that alone is not going to be enough to stop the decay. The rule of law has been severely damaged. And the radical leftists in the Biden administration, they're not just out to get President Trump. They're after all of us. They are after all of us who, like President Trump, believe in America's founding principles. They are out to end freedom of religion. They are out to enforce orthodoxy to the state-sponsored LGBTQ alphabet soup, state religion. They're out to end freedom of speech. They're even out to end freedom of thought. Indeed, the radical left no longer welcomes any civil discourse or debate. They won't even settle for mere acceptance of their positions. No, increasingly they demand that we celebrate, vocally and outwardly celebrate and affirm their positions. If you don't enthusiastically voice your support, they will try to use and abuse the law to come after you, to silence you completely, even to the extent of destroying your livelihood or sending you to prison. This happened in a case that I worked on when I was a legal counsel for Alliance Defending Freedom in Pinedale, Wyoming, a number of years back, before the Obergefell decision forced same-sex marriage on the entire country. Judge Neely, a strong Christian, told a reporter that she could not perform same-sex marriages as she was authorized to do by the powers of her office. It was a town of 2,000 in Wyoming, a very red state. Well, the Judicial Commission heard about this. The Wyoming Judicial Commission, they went after Judge Neely. They tried to remove her from the bench because they said that she was exhibiting bias in contradiction of, violating the Code of Judicial Ethics in Wyoming, which is nonsense. She was just stating her religious views on marriage. And that's it. Something that every American should have the freedom to do, and has the freedom to do under the First Amendment. But we fought back. We were able to defeat the left's attempt to silence Judge Neely, and she was able to keep her job. But this was years ago. Think about that. And it's only gotten worse since then. This battle has been going on for quite a long time. You see, ultimately, the radical left, they are out to undermine the Constitution, to tear down this country, and to replace it with an authoritarian socialist regime. And so now we find ourselves at this critical juncture, in the midst of a battle where the very foundations of our republic are under attack. We find ourselves at a true time for choosing, as Ronald Reagan said. Here in Minnesota, perhaps better than anywhere else, we can clearly see the battle for what it truly is. It's a battle between good on the one hand and evil on the other hand. Despite having a razor-thin one-seat majority in the Minnesota Senate, Democrats use their control of the governorship and both houses of the legislature to push through the most radical, most extreme, damaging leftist agenda ever conceived in any state in the Union ever in the history of our country. They started by attacking life. enshrining in state law a so-called right to kill unborn children up to the moment of birth. But the Democrats didn't stop there. They actually went further than that. By repealing the Born Alive Infants Protection Act, they removed legal penalties for abortionists who allow an infant to die after the infant survives a botched abortion. And it's important to understand that infants do survive botched abortions. This does happen. According to the Minnesota Department of Health in 2021, 5 babies were born alive after failed abortions and were then left to die. 2 of those babies, according to the report, were viable when they were born. They could have survived. The Department of Health report states that the infants were given comfort care. Yeah. They did not survive. My friends, that is infanticide. That is evil. And changing the law so that those who commit infanticide may go unpunished is likewise evil. But the abortion issue isn't the only area where Minnesota Democrats attack life this legislative session. They launched an all-out assault against children in our state as well by passing the so-called trans refuge or trans sanctuary bill. Part of that bill grants Minnesota courts temporary emergency jurisdiction in custody matters if a child is in the state, whether the child is from the state or not, and the child has been unable to obtain so-called gender-affirming care, i.e. gender mutilation surgery, puberty blockers, or other horrible drugs that distort and change a person's body to allow them to pretend that they're something that they're not. Temporary emergency jurisdiction under the law prior to this session was reserved for cases where the child is abandoned or the child is threatened with abuse. But under the Democrats' Trans the Kids bill, a Minnesota court can take jurisdiction, issue a child custody order just because the child hasn't been able to get a doctor to conduct genital mutilation surgery or drug the child with chemicals that stop their regular development. The bill opens the door to child abuse at the hands of doctors, barbaric doctors, who esteem profit higher than their Hippocratic oath. It's terrible. The new law completely undermines the natural and constitutional right of parents to correctly upbring their children. And it is part and parcel of the radical trans agenda. The bill, like the trans agenda, is evil, downright evil. There's no other way to put it. The trans agenda, and this bill is part of it, seeks to groom children and push more people, including kids, into the delusion that one's biological sex is not immutable. It's not the immutable, unchangeable gift of God that it is, determined and reflected by one's chromosomes. The trans agenda denies that reality. It denies the reality that just about every cell in a person's body contains either an XX or XY chromosome, right? And that's why, 500 years after a person dies, we can dig up a bone fragment, and we can tell whether that person was a man or a woman. It denies that reality. The trans agenda and that bill, it's a direct attack against God and against the truths woven into God's creation. It is also evil because it ignores and indeed promotes the infliction of severe harms on people, especially kids. The trans agenda seeks to normalize self-identification of gender identity, a completely made-up concept. And with that, to normalize gruesome genital mutilation procedures and terrible drugs that have extremely dangerous, long-lasting impacts on health. Things that can't be undone. Mental health, emotional health, spiritual health, physical health. Now, most people, and all people, if they're being honest, who have undergone gender transition procedures, they struggle with feelings of regret and dissatisfaction. And how could it be otherwise? They are harming their bodies in order to pretend that they are something that they are not. They are trying to fight against reality itself. Reality has a way of coming through. So they feel regret and dissatisfaction. Terrible things follow. So do not believe the lies that the trans agenda is about helping kids. In fact, contrary to the claims of the radical left trans activist crowd, there is no scientific consensus at all, even about so-called social transition. That is, a social transition is living as if one is a member of the opposite sex. There's no consensus among any medical professionals that that's an appropriate treatment for gender dysphoria in children, let alone surgeries and puberty blockers and all this other crazy nonsense. Indeed, it's well established, this is shocking, that the vast majority, up to 97.8% of biological male children who express gender dysphoria revert to a gender identity consistent with their biological sex by late adolescence or adulthood, if they're left untreated, if you don't intervene and mess things up. Because reality has a way of coming through, and they live in conformity with reality. So the left is pushing this ideology that harms children directly. So what is driving the trans agenda? Well, it's about gratifying the desires of adults who identify as a gender other than their actual sex. They want affirmation. They want everyone to celebrate the path that they have chosen. You see, the so-called trans movement, that's what it's all about. It's all about self-gratification. It's worship of the self. It's about promoting the falsehood that individuals can define reality for themselves, that they can define morality for themselves. It's wrapped up in the sin of pride. This is interesting. Pride month, all that nonsense. Pride, as defined by St. Thomas Aquinas, is the sin of an excessive desire for oneself, which rejects subjection to God. Well, that's exactly what the trans agenda promotes. They don't want to be subject to the reality of God's creation or God's moral rules. They want to take on for themselves the role of creator, recreate themselves, define themselves, live their lives for their gratification of themselves, reject God directly and entirely. That's what makes the trans agenda so truly satanic and evil. Now, the communists and socialists on the left, meanwhile, they view the transgender activist crowd as useful to their own ends. Because you see, transing the kids destabilizes the institution of the family. And it fights against the truth of God and the moral rules for society that God has established. And think about this. The more people who are oriented entirely towards self-gratification, well, the more people that the left can easily control by means of doling out rewards and inflicting punishments. The radical left pushes the trans agenda in part because it turns free, independent people who see themselves and their fellow man as created in God's image into malleable serfs, better fit to be ruled by their elite guardians. Ultimately, the trans agenda is just another tool that the radical left is using to tear down the family, tear down external standards of conduct, and tear down America. They seek to replace our current society with an authoritarian socialist dystopia, some kind of terrible mix of A Brave New World in 1984. So indeed, we are in the midst of a war for the very soul of America. Well, the Democrats didn't stop at the trans refuge bill. No. They did a lot more things, and I can't talk about all of them. They also created a so-called hate speech database. You've heard about this? Bias registry. The bill established grants for community groups. I'm sure they're great groups, right? To collect data on incidents motivated by hate. Speech that they claim is motivated by hate. And to report that data to the Department of Human Rights. This is so obviously unconstitutional, it's ridiculous that anyone could ever even propose it with a straight face. The First Amendment bars the government from tracking citizens' speech and expression based on its content or on the viewpoint of the speaker. That's fundamental, basic constitutional law. And there can also be no doubt that this new law will chill expression. It will suppress speech. Because people know that if they say certain things, they might get reported to the government. So they're not going to say those things. And a government action that suppresses speech in that way, based on viewpoint, that violates the First Amendment, clearly. The violation is egregious. I look forward to this bill being challenged in court. But it's abundantly clear that Democrats, they don't care at all about free speech. They don't care at all about the Constitution. They are out to silence conservatives and gut the Constitution, state and federal constitutions. But Minnesota's Democrats' parade of evils didn't stop there, oh no. Among many other things, Democrats passed a bill to provide driver's licenses to illegal immigrants. Then, they passed another bill that will automatically register people to vote when they apply for or renew a driver's license or interact with any other government agency. Automatic registration. Then they passed one that allows 16 and 17-year-olds to pre-register to vote. This will make election fraud much easier for the Democrats. Election integrity is a serious issue that we need to take seriously, we need to fight for. The Democrats are apparently interested in undermining our elections and undermining people's confidence in the electoral franchise. When that happens, when people don't trust elections, it leads to disorder and ultimately chaos because people wonder, well, the laws are being passed and enacted by the right people? If not, are they legitimate? If they're not legitimate, why should we follow them at all? It seems that the Democrats want to promote that kind of breakdown. The Democrats also banned so-called conversion therapy, undermining the First Amendment rights of therapists to talk with parents, with their patients rather, about gender identity and sexual orientation. They also passed 2 gun control bills enacting a red flag law and universal background checks. They banned no-knock warrants. They stripped pregnancy resource centers of state funding. I could go on and on and on and on. They did just about everything they could think of that would make Minnesota less free and more authoritarian. They did everything they could to weaken the family and undermine faith and undermine freedom. They did everything possible to expand the state and its power while diminishing the rights of the individual. We must not mince words. Whether they know it or not, what they did is evil. So now is truly a time for choosing in Minnesota, just as it is a time for choosing across our entire nation. Will we stand in the breach and take action to fight for what is good, just, and right? Will we stand up on the issues that truly matter, lean into the culture war, and call out evil for what it is? Will we be the voice of truth, no matter how uncomfortable or unpopular or inconvenient that may be for us? Or will we, like so many pseudo-conservatives, and Republicans in name only, Republicans who call themselves moderate, be content to just battle on the margins, talking only about supposedly safer issues, while avoiding the radical left's war on culture and faith and freedom? Let us never forget the words of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He said, "Silence in the face of evil is evil itself." He was absolutely correct. Now, I've been thinking long and hard, as many of you have, about how we got to this fateful, pivotal moment. You see, we've been going down the wrong path for a very long time. Minnesota Democrats aren't the first politicians to wage war against the Constitution. Neither is Joe Biden. Neither is Barack Obama. How is it that presidents and legislators and even Supreme Court justices can think that they can violate our higher law, the Constitution, and even violate the divine law upon which all laws are based, and get away with it? The sense of impunity that they have, I believe, comes from their rejection of God. In short, liberty dies when you take God out of the republic.
Amen.
That is how we as a state and nation have chosen the wrong path. If we don't turn back soon, there will be no going back. We'll quickly pass that point of no return, or perhaps we already have. Indeed, we stand at the edge of an abyss. We are but a few steps away from 1,000 years of darkness. We wonder, how is it that so many well-intentioned people do not see the danger in front of us? How can they not see the abyss? And then as we stand there at the abyss, at the edge of that abyss, staring into the darkness, we hear voices that threaten us. We hear voices shouting slogans, urging us to jump forward, urging us to be on the so-called right side of history. We hear them threaten our families, our livelihoods, our jobs. There are growing numbers of people who are intent on punishing anyone who refuses to conform to the emerging leftist orthodoxy. They want to push us into the darkness. They're going to be there. They want us to go with them. Why? Why are they doing this? I think Mother Teresa actually gave us the answer. She once remarked that the truly poor are not the materially deprived of the third world. Rather, the truly poor are the intellectuals of the West who choose not to know the truth, who do not want to abide by any norms except for the norms that they establish for themselves. That's true poverty. As Mother Teresa put it, quote, "The truly poor are those who deny any God but themselves." Why does the left have this inherent totalitarian impulse? Well, it follows from worshiping at the altar of the secular state. It arises when you banish the transcendent from political life. The left, people on the left, they seek to, in the words of Father James Shaw, add a touch of nobility and purpose to their existence, to escape the meaningless that they have purchased for themselves by rejecting God. Attempting to fill that spiritual vacuum inside them, they sign up for causes. They invent freedoms without any basis in natural law or natural right or divine anything. They invent false rights and false gods, like the supposed right to choose, trans rights, the freedom to marry. They establish causes to help the environment, to eradicate material poverty. They seek to wield the power of the state to bring a self-focused heaven into place here on earth. Of course, it doesn't work. Their plans fail as they must, and they inevitably find that the meaninglessness still remains. You can't have heaven on earth. You have to wait. But when their plans to build utopia, to bring the New Jerusalem right here to Minnesota, fail, they don't give up. No. They keep going. They become zealous. I think they sense how close they are to that void. They sense the meaninglessness enveloping them, so they become zealous to their anti-Christian, anti-religious creed. They say that to themselves and to one another, if only we better use our reason. Our plans fail, but if we think about it more, we'll be able to eradicate poverty. Or with this new plan, we'll be able to bring about complete equality, complete equity. They say things like, if only we find the right experts, if only we do more studies, if only we create the right system, the right bureaucracy, if only we get rid of all the flaws in our system, right? They are trying to use the power of the state to fill up the God-shaped hole within themselves. And that project is obviously doomed. Yet they never acknowledge the enormity of what they set out to do. No, instead they seek to justify their plans. After all, they say they're on the right side of history. Then we hear them say this. They say, now if only we could silence the saboteurs. If only we could silence those who don't see the truth. If only we could silence those who claim there is a God. We, the saboteurs of the God deniers' plans, we must pray with the psalmist. Put fear in them, O Lord, let the nations know themselves to be but men. So where does this leave us? America has fallen. It is falling. It has fallen. I believe we are at or past that point of no return. The radical left has succeeded in convincing too many that God is dead. Not looking good. But here's the thing. God is not dead. And with God, there is no such thing as a point of no return. The beacon of liberty is laid low. It has fallen, yet still there is hope. Because man is not the light of the world. Because 2,000 years ago, an impossibly beautiful and stunning and bright light burst forth from a rock-hewn tomb. And that light shines still. And it will make all things new. Remember this. From the ruins of ancient Rome, God raised up his mighty church. So, stand up, take heart, and have faith. We have work to do. We have parts to play. First, we must stand up for truth. We must proclaim truth no matter what, even if no one is listening. If everyone is scorning us, if everything is crumbling down, falling down around us, crashing down, still, we must stand up and proclaim truth. Why? For the simple reason that we are called to do it. The truth is good in and of itself. Proclaiming truth, capital T, truth, is good and is right and must be done. Regardless whether anyone hears it, God will hear it. He will hear us. We must expect difficulty and opposition. So we must speak truth, especially when it is difficult to do so, when it makes us uncomfortable, when those who refuse to hear and those who refuse to see threaten us and intimidate us. There's a political element to this too, of course. We must fight political battles courageously and stand up on a principled basis, on the basis of our founding principles as understood by our founding fathers, including the understanding that all those principles are based in and flow from God. We must help others find their own courage to do the same. When we proclaim the truth, others will start doing the same thing because they see that they're not alone. And in so doing, by our example, we can reawaken the traditional American values and virtues that are asleep in the hearts of so many Americans. So many Americans, they sense that spiritual vacuum. They sense that something's wrong. They long for something they don't know quite what. But deep within them, traditional American values are still there. We've got to tap into that. We've got to wake those values up. Show them what's on the line and motivate them. You know, so many consultants in the political class, they talk about how we need, just talk about tax cuts and regulations and safe issues like that. You know what? Those things are not going to motivate people. That doesn't inspire people. Yes, those are important issues, of course. We need to work on all of those fronts. But you're not going to motivate someone and inspire them to really take action and change things by talking about tax cuts. You inspire people by talking about how the left is trying to kill unborn children and really helping them see that a baby in the womb is a life. By telling them about how the trans agenda hurts kids. By standing up for parental rights. We've got to talk about those issues. We've got to lean into those issues. We must do everything possible to restore the values and institutions of family and faith and personal obligation. Here's another thing. We must band together. We must help one another. Not just the stranger who needs help, but just as importantly, those of us who suffer for speaking the truth. Those of us who put ourselves on the line. Those who fall, those who are persecuted. Take special care to help them. We have to band together and help each other because we can't do this alone. We must be like the early Christians under Roman persecution. We must pray. We must lift up our hearts. We must be faithful, and even in the midst of suffering, show gratitude. Because we know that there is something beyond this life. And we also see that we see all the good in the world. We know that fallen humanity will be restored because of the truth of Christ. We cannot win this battle for the soul of America on our own. We can't do it alone. You know what, though? We can't even do it together. We can only do it together and with God. So, expecting insult and injury and cruelty, let us here and now rededicate ourselves to the restoration of our state and our nation. Let us stand up and proclaim the truth. Let us stand up and fight for what we know is right. Let us stand up for the Constitution, for the rule of law, and for the sovereignty of God, for life, for faith, and for freedom. And by God's grace, the light of liberty's sacred fire will banish the darkness from our land, and we, the people, will be victorious. Thank you all. Happy to take a few questions if there are any.
As an attorney, I've always been told that the omnibus bill is against our Constitution. A lot of this happens in the omnibus package. What's your opinion on it?
State Constitution? Yes, there's a provision that all bills have to be single subject bills. In my opinion, the omnibus procedure completely violates that. Now, the idea behind a single subject bill rule is in the Constitution is to make sure that legislators, the people's elected representatives, have the ability to consider thoroughly a single issue and then vote on it, right? And then communicate with their constituents about it. And that allows constituents to feed in, to give feedback to their legislatures, to give their opinions to their legislators and make sure that that is heard. If you just jam everything into a single omnibus bill, obviously people aren't aware of everything that's in there. The legislators themselves can't be aware of all that's in there. So that idea breaks down. So it's against the spirit of the rule, completely against the spirit of the rule. So there's a certain point at which the bill becomes too long and has too many subjects where it's obviously in violation of that rule. It's completely unconstitutional. Also, there are agency bills. The agencies. When I was in the legislature in 2011 and 12, this blew my mind. I was on the Judiciary Committee, and then I don't remember which committee it was. I was on, maybe taxes. But one of the departments came to the committee that had jurisdiction over the department with giant agency bill. It's like that big. And all my Republican colleagues said, it's just an agency bill. Just vote pass it through committee. What's in it? Wait, we got this yesterday and we're supposed to vote on it today? What in the world? And why should an agency, an arm of the executive branch, be telling the legislature what laws to pass about that agency? That makes no sense. So I refuse to vote for it.
Has it ever gone to the state Supreme Court?
They have made rulings on this, and there have been some successful ones, but they've interpreted the rule so broadly that it doesn't have the impact it should have. So I think we need to keep fighting on that for sure. And it'd be good to, one of the things we need to do is call a constitutional convention to make sure that the provisions of the state constitution are rigidly enforced. Put some more clarity in there. We also need a convention of the states to correct some problems with the federal constitution. Not problems with the Constitution itself, but rather to make sure that the original understanding of the Constitution is enforced. It's kind of the Hail Mary thing that you do if everything's falling apart. Well, guess what? Everything's falling apart. And there's a safeguard there too, because once the Convention of the States passes out amendments to the Constitution, they don't get added to the Constitution unless 3/4 of the states vote to ratify them, state legislatures. So nothing crazy would happen. But it's important that we take steps like that and think outside the box a little bit to bring ourselves back to our founding principle. Any other questions?
Your comments about Judge Neely were very interesting because down in Pinedale and Wyoming. And the whole idea behind representative government is that the people are supposed to represent what people think in general in the community in Wyoming. And we love to go to Wyoming and the hole in the wall there and the trout fish there, but at any rate, it would seem to me that the governor and anybody else that's there wouldn't give grief to somebody like Judge Neely who wanted to represent the basic thoughts in representative government of what the people think there.
Right.
The natural law does not provide, or where does it say that men can marry men? It's ridiculous. And when this gentleman talked about the omnibus bill, it sounds like our legislators aren't even thinking about representative government. They're just passing laws that come along.
Some of them are doing a better job than others, right? But it's a tough fight. With Pinedale, Wyoming, Judge Neely, what happened there was leftists got in control of one commission within the government, the Commission on Judicial Conduct. And they basically used that to go after Judge Neely. So leftists are good at this. They get into power in certain places and pockets of government, and then they exercise that power immediately to push their their radical agenda. And regardless of anyone's rights, regardless of freedom of religion or anything else. And that's what happened there. And unfortunately, we were able to fight that back, to beat that back. And the Wyoming Supreme Court ruled in favor of Judge Neely ultimately. But that kind
Question for Doug. As a lawyer, when you look at all of these laws and they're passed them that are unconstitutional and go against our beliefs, boy, you guys could be busy for a lot of years to come.
that is very true. We need lawyers to, and we're working on
We
this.
don't need that
Groups of
many.
lawyers to come together. The problem is there aren't that many conservative lawyers, right? There aren't many conservative lawyers.
Right.
But we need more of them because we got to fight these things, and we can fight them in court. One wonderful thing President Trump did of many was appoint really great judges to the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. That Minnesota's in the 8th Circuit, the Supreme Court as well, and then also good federal district court judges. So in federal court at least, state courts not so great, right? In Minnesota, because
Especially with Chief Justice Gildea
oh my
retired.
goodness, yeah, right. It's even worse. But federal court, we can do things, and we can bring cases and challenge a lot of these different laws on grounds where you can be in federal court and hopefully score some victories and pull some of these things back. And it's not going to fix everything, but it's important to do that for two reasons. One, to fix some of these things, get things back in line with the Constitution, but then also just to raise awareness about these issues. Litigation is a good way to get into the media.
But is there enough conservative lawyers?
Well, the upper middle
There
class
is
center-
well, Upper Minnesota Center. So again, they literally function on donations. But in talking with them and a couple other groups, there are more legal resources nationally coordinating to help us.
Sure.
Because we make right. California, they just said they're not radical enough. We're now it. We are the epicenter for everything radical. Right? They call it the progressive heaven. And so that's going to bring in, because if they don't take care of it here, and they don't help us fight that in the courts everywhere they can, it's coming everywhere. So just like the Uber bill, right?
Yeah.
It was one of the things that I wanted it to pass. Because it would have been the only radical policy where they overreached that would have touched everybody who votes against us vehemently. And so it would be good that they see the effects of a real bad policy now. Uber will likely just turn it off in Minnesota, and they should. Because if they don't do it here, they got 69,000 other cities that they likely would be coming to.
And I do know that there are a lot of different legal groups nationally that are coming to
Yep.
Minnesota,
Yep.
focusing on Minnesota. Alliance Defending Freedom, Pacific Legal Justice Center. True North Legal is a Minnesota-based one.
Yep.
But Minnesota's going to become a hotbed for conservative litigation efforts to roll things back and to highlight some of the things. Because they're inflicting harms on the child that never heal, and inflicting injuries that never get better, and so
Never-
we need more
never
time,
go away.
more treatments, more money.
Mr.
Going
Sam.
on all across the nation in so many different ways in every state in the nation. So it's really a problem. The leftists get in there, and you see, the legislature, the Democrats, took the state Senate by 1 seat, right? Like 300 some votes. And yet they put the pedal to the metal and they passed every single possible terrible piece of legislation they could ever imagine. And they're going to keep doing it. Republicans, when we have power, unfortunately, let's try to be cautious. Let's not do anything too wild, We got to start thinking about how to save this country and how to use the power that we have when we have it to make sure we're steering ourselves back to our founding principles. There has to be some kind of reset. And that means we got to stand up on the issues that matter. Sure.
One of the things when you sit back and look at it is come election cycle, everybody believes in God. And everybody goes to church. And then once they get elected, they kind of forget all about it.
That's right. And churches need to get more involved. Some are good, some aren't, but all churches need to be involved in politics right now because we're in the midst of a spiritual warfare, and politics is one of the battlefields. So that's absolutely critical. And I think the Democrats and the left have used the so-called separation of church and state that's not really in the Constitution to convince everyone that God should never be brought up in government, which is ridiculous. Because the founding fathers would have seen law as emanating from the divine law, eternal law, natural law. They would not have seen law as merely positive law, merely what men create. A law that man creates that is out of line with divine law or natural law is not a law at all. That's how they would have seen it. So you have to bring God into the equation, right? But by fooling everyone and thinking God shouldn't be in government. They get away with so many terrible things. So we got to get the churches more involved.
But then when they come to run, they're all with you. Then once they
Yeah.
get elected,
Well,
no, it
Democrats-
doesn't matter what I said, I was just running for office. But
Democrats try to take God out of the party.
Where's everybody else?
Yep. I'll take
One
one more.
comment on that. The one thing I experienced is a lot of people believe in God, but what God do they believe in? I've had some of them that have actually said that their God is completely different than what you perceive as God.
Question was, so the comment was, what God do they believe in? That's what you hear from people. Yeah. Well, a lot of the leftists, they believe in the God of the secular state, right? But one more, or two more. But
I interviewed one of the new House representatives recently on my program, Trusted Facts. She said the railroading that went on down there, they did not follow proper procedures on anything. And so it was like, we're doing this full speed ahead. Can you talk a little bit to that? Because you got freshman House and Senate people, they don't know procedures. I mean, they're not well established yet, and it was like a tsunami for them.
right, and Democrats are very good at getting in there and, well, not just following some of the intricacies of the rules, but also changing the rules in order to push things through. And I think our next speaker is going to address that directly, so I'll let him do that.
You know, what you were describing up there, so proud of you. That's what we wanted to hear. And that's what was absent from, I believe, from our representatives out here. We had, the vote was right, but by and large, the people out here, they had no idea what was going on. If it could have been brought out there, town halls, or in the newspaper, or something like that, where the evils of what they did with the abortion, letting the baby die. You know, all of us right now are who believe in the Second Amendment. They passed laws against all of us, against right in the face of the Second Amendment. We didn't know any of that because nobody told us that. They voted against them. It just goes on and on and on and on. And how about the gender reassignment? That's horrible. I think if the people knew that out here, if there was some people, representatives come out and tell us, so instead of just, you know, letting it go, that I did my duty, I voted, and then meeting with other groups, I think we could have done a lot. The people, we would have lost, there's no question about that. There was no way we could have won. But by God, the people would have known out here. Maybe some of the churches and everybody like that. But I think where there was so much that was missing.
Yeah, we got to get the churches involved, and the media has just been doing a blackout. They're not talking about anything. That's the thing.
Doug, maybe I should add, make sure that you're following the representative and actually sign up to their email, so you're actually getting their weekly update from the Capitol, so you actually hear what's truly going on down there at the Capitol.
That's a very small group.
And I think another thing to make mention of is the media is not our friend.
That's right.
Everything that's sent out to the media is considered propaganda.
Yeah, the media is just pretending like nothing bad happened. Everything's normal. It's not. We're up against that. We got to get churches involved and just speak louder and speak to people's hearts. Talk about what really matters. That's the key. Well, one more.
It sounds like a lot of rule breaking going on down there, and nothing's stopping it.
They broke a lot of constitutional precepts, and they hammered away at the rule of law. They did lots of terrible things. In terms of the procedural rules, they changed a lot of things so that they would allow them to do that. And I think Mark is going to talk a little bit about that. So I'll let him talk about that. But thank you all so much.
You're an attorney,
Yes.
and you know the Declaration of Independence. And I just found this out just within the recent years here. And it refers in the Declaration of Independence to, I don't have my glasses, ends. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, the right of freedom and pursuit of happiness, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, the government, and to institute new government laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect safety, happiness, and prudence. If that language, and I'm sure you know this, but I wonder how many people, that's written on the $100 bill.
Yeah, that's the foundation of
Clever,
our country.
the guy from the Treasury who put that in there. That's written in small print on our $100 bills.
Yeah, we've got to get serious about our founding principles. That's why I've done this podcast. That's why I've been in politics, doing everything I'm trying to do. Because we've got to get back to the idea that government should be instituted for the well-being of the people that are governed, and the idea of popular sovereignty, and also the idea that law comes from, emanates from God. If we lose that, we lose everything else. Like I said, if you take God out of the republic, then liberty dies. Thank you all. Thank you all, not just Minnesota, but across the country.
And lots of great success. So one of those things you guys, if you wanted to do, you guys, an update, James Dickey is an amazing spokesperson. Follow me, they're doing a podcast now, but follow their work. But James loves to come out. He is a very, very good spokesperson. But he can give you that legislative or not the legal update about, he can go through 15 different cases of great success. And they take on individual, and they're a nonpartisan group. They just happen to be constitutional, which makes them very partisan. But they fight all battles. But he's a good guy. Question?
Just wondering, is it even conceivable to begin looking at stripping schools of their authority? Like if you go to the garage with your truck and you're going in for an oil change, but somebody there has all the wisdom and they decide that your truck would make a better clawfoot bathtub, take your truck from you, they turn it into a clawfoot bathtub and send you home, and if you say, I don't like that, you end up in jail.
Yep.
That sounds absurd, but it's a fraction as absurd as what is taking place.
Yeah.
So how do we start actually stripping the authority, the unsanctioned authority?
Well, it's unconstitutional.
Completely.
And why are these people not being held accountable?
Takes a lawsuit.
It does. This is another issue
Takes
of
lots of-
litigation.
But we,
right?
the people, I mean, they don't have the power to do it.
They don't have the authority.
They have the power to write law and sign whatever they want,
But if
regardless
it's
of its content.
unconstitutional, it's null and void. These laws are unconstitutional. So it just,
Right, but it takes
to
a
me,
lawyer
I
to
guess
win their
as a woman,
challenge.
I'm
They have
wondering
to-
where are all the good men to stand up to this? That's my question as a woman. Where are the men standing up to the, right, absolutely, right,
But you can't
absolutely.
go to every single school. Like, who's going to put that?
Well, but that's for me. If you don't know me, I talked about how we gave up the power. Those school boards. That's not a metro area problem. It's all throughout. The Democrats have focused on every elected seat, every elected office, and they kept us aside because you greedy people went and started businesses, worked really hard, worked a long time, and raised your families. They didn't. They focused on taking back that power at all levels. And so that's one of the fastest things we can turn around to grab that power back. And that's where county prosecutors come in very, very important, right? So what we take up, and this acquiescence of that, well, the school board doesn't really have a lot. Hell, they don't. They're the governing body of that independently owned business that feeds our public school system. And so we can do that.
We can support some of those efforts. We can support school board candidates and get the message out there.
Yep.
That these things are going to
That's
change. With
why-
litigation, actually. Right. We get conservative lawyers in there and push back at school boards that do things that are illegal,
Yeah.
ultra various, contrary to the law, contrary to the Constitution. That can highlight and spotlight issues and support political efforts. So there's a way that we need to use litigation to support political efforts, and the Democrats have been doing that to great success on their side for a very, very, very long time.
How about a defund the school board campaign?
Well, I mean, there are, not defund. You have to replace them. And so, it's at least now in our dialogue. Now it's putting we've had great success. If you want to talk about success, hundreds of local offices were taken back. They were. Brett's one of them, and so, and where's Jed? Jed is.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
Todd, so taking them back. And even if you think they share your values, have you shown up to make sure they are? And my motto has been show up. You will provide accountability they're not accustomed to in most cases.
Yeah.
You show up at 5 years and wonder, what road did I screw up? You know, but we have to do it. Show up and be informed, and then you become dangerous in a healthy sense that you can then participate and influence. I'm going to meet with some townships. Do you know what a township, how many people you have at a township vote? 250, 300 people, maybe on the high side? With as few as 15 to 20 people, you could put ballot initiatives to decide the composition of the board, 3 or 5. Or when you vote, should everybody in the township vote? Probably, so maybe you move your election to the general election. Your total quality of life starts at that level. And so that's what we've been doing. And so I'm one of those people who scream all over the place about we've given up that power. By the mere fact, when I get in a room and they all, why didn't you stop this? Why didn't you do this? How many meetings have you attended at a school board, a township?
I have.
No, it's great. It's great because so many, we've had council people quit because people showed up. I'm not kidding. Not kidding.
Well, and you know, Mark, I can say this. That's why the Minnesota Conservative PAC is so important. Is it's not so much looking at the Republican Democrat. It's taking back our ground. It's taking back the school boards, the town boards. I sat on the town board and I got busy with my project, and I'm like, hey guys, I'm not going to run again. They said, oh, you don't get it. You're on it until you die.
Yeah.
So then I fooled them. I ran for county commissioner. And we got 3 new conservative county commissioners. Isani, you guys got 4.
We got 3. We should have had 4.
3. Well,
Chisago, I got 2. I should have had 4.
but the whole thing is, that's why this PAC and what they're trying to do is so important, is to get the word out. If you want to make change, the Democrats for many, many years, they've been training their people.
They operated in your backyard.
Yeah. Got to do it wherever we can. Wherever you have control, that's where you got to.
Wherever
you have influence, that's where you
right.
got to.
And nobody, don't be dissuaded by, well, these are nonpartisan offices. That's all garbage.
Yeah.
There are no nonpartisan people.
I'll put it to you this way. We had to make some tough decisions at the county level. I went out and called everybody I know and said, come. 250 people show up at the county commissioners meeting, and all the other commissioners, they start whispering, what are we going to do now? I said, well, you got to let them talk.
Yeah.
And you know what? They backed down.
I think we see exactly what's going on today, I believe, is how many people are here. We advertise the heck out of this.
Yep.
And this is the problem. I'll go to school, I go to a lot of school board meetings.
Yep.
And sometimes there's 2 people there, me and another person.
Absolutely.
And then people complain.
Bill, you've heard me. Life's been too good for too long.
100%
Nobody's had to pay any attention to the things most important, which is really in your backyard first. But like you say, you're greedy, went out and started businesses, you work 80 hours a week, you raise your family. And they funded their apparatus of nonprofits and all of those entities, public unions as well, that work nonstop on campaigning. It's stacked against it, but in spite of being outspent, it's 1,800 votes that made the difference, right? And that's because 19% of our voters statewide didn't show up. There are just as many people who claim to share values and those that don't share values trying to convince you that your vote doesn't matter. 1,820
The thing we have on our
votes.
side is we've got truth on our side. And if people actually knew what was going on, if people actually knew how leftist policies impact people, they would agree with us, they would side with us. So the Democrats have a much harder job. They have to do more organizing, they have to do a lot more work to push through their lies. We just have to show up where we can.
Stand
out
right
there and push out the
down.
truth.
Right.
We'll do one last question.
So piggybacking on that a little bit, one of the issues I see, you talked about what, 19% can come out and vote?
Yep.
Okay, well, we've had a real problem around here, it's affected me. We have state senators campaigning door to door against another state senator because he's too conservative. Right? I have friends that are true conservatives that don't bother to go vote because they're like, why? Why? And then you hear these Republicans saying, well, we got to get more moderates so we can get the votes.
Now, but you have, but here's what you have to do though. There are, like I said, those that claim to share values and those that are true, right? The Democrats that are trying to convince you, they're using many of the same tactics to try and convince you and the people you speak about. When you talk about, hey, I want I want a rabid conservative, right? I want to beat everybody bloody red, meaning conservative. You have to focus on and make sure you get the best electable person for your district, right? And in some cases, in a tough district, that might be somebody, if you can put a measurement to it, are they only share 70% of your values? And would you toss him out because you like the guy that's 99, right? Super perfect candidate. Who would you take? Somebody who can win it, or the 99%?
I disagree with that.
Which one would you take?
I understand what you're saying, but I would vote for the 99%.
You would vote to be, if you, you don't know what that person is and what they're going to vote. They espouse values that sound good, right? And there's a lot of people blood red conservative. And so what those organizations, there's hundreds of them. I can tell you my first learning, my first education is, you know how many of them are down there at the Capitol actually doing the work? Because if they're taking money and they're advocating for you, there's only a couple of them down there that are doing the work. And so if not, I call them grifters. They get to speak and write, they're amazing marketers, right? I give them credit. Again, if we work together, we can do great things if they really intended to win. But they're devoid of having to talk about the political environment that we operate in. That's really the difference. And so how do you recruit the best candidate, somebody who wants to win? And there's a lot of intangibles in that too. You could be the most electable person, blood red, but maybe you're just not approachable. There's all those things. So how do you have a really good vetting process? And it's hard to get really good, high-quality candidates that are willing to bust their tails, that bridge that gap. You want a person that's highly conservative. Well, let's say that 70% person you would never vote for. That person's going to likely, if you legislate intelligently. So what that person's got an environmental arm, right? I think we're all environmentalists. We want clean air, clean water, right? And so you have to legislate intelligently so he gets that vote, right? We want clean air. So how do you create a legislative agenda that I get my vote, he gets his vote, and we gain control of the gavel? Because without that gavel, you mean nothing. We end up with right where we're at today. So that's the part. Those organizations, and everybody probably follows 10 of them. That, right, from right to work, you name it, right? They're all pro-life, all of them, right? Even MCCL is out there, right? It's like, okay, how do you get to, would you take a 15-week abortion ban, right? I think 80% of America would say, yes, we do that. Because the rest is going to be on us for culture, to value life. Legislation is never going to dictate culture. Who would you take? Would you take perpetually being in the minority? We lose. This is what you get. And so the other things is, don't vote in person only, right? All those things. We have to ballot bank. We have all the people. We got to focus on the people that vote in frequently. And we're going to have to deploy some technologies and to really bring home every vote that's rightfully ours, right? And participate. Democrats aren't out there trying to convince you on their values. They're out there, they know who's registered Democrat, and they're going to get their ballot, right? And I think their theory is harassment stops once we get your ballot. But that's the battle we have. You think I'm less than a conservative? And people are like, no, I want the true blood red. There is no perfect candidate. You got to get the person that can win. I've worked.
Sorry, within reason. Obviously, we don't want a person that can win who's a leftist. If we're in a situation, right? If we're in a situation where the only people that can win are liberals, then we would still want candidates who can't win.
Well, in that fact,
so there's a way to make sure that we have a party that can build a majority. Once we get the gavel, they'll actually do things to fix things.
And that's fine.
Otherwise, it's not useful having candidates.
But the point is that you said
so
90%
didn't show up.
They need a reason.
Yeah, and I agree. And
they
need a candidate that excites them and fires them up.
I agree, and then it's candidate recruitment. Everybody's here. Everybody's met somebody that you think can win, right? I can tell you, it's hard, right? And I'm a guy, if you're going to take somebody out, you better be willing to commit 2 full years of your life, 7 days a week. Because if you're not going to commit to that, you aren't even ready to serve.
Yep.
The demands get a lot more difficult.
And that's a really
at that
good point, because you know what, you never really know if a person's truly conservative until they get down there.
Yeah.
Because lots of folks, they talk about the conservatives, and then they get to the Capitol and things change.
Yeah.
And the pressures of the Capitol change them. And that's a problem.
Well,
So when you
and-
find a good candidate, Mark,
and who do you-
who's really solid conservative, and they get down there and they actually put their words into action, that's gold.
Yeah. Yeah, but we are only the collection, we are only possible by volunteers. But I can tell you, when I see all those grifters out there, I mean, it's unbelievable. Very few of them did I see. In fact, the ones that you guys all know very well, they come down to the Capitol, they're given a half an hour and they just start throwing out demands. And we'll work to make sure you're a minority. Those are the people that are trying to convince you that only settle for a 99. That's it. Because they don't have to ever talk about the political reality. Right? We're in Minnesota. The gavel matters, and how do you get that gavel? Doug's right? You want to get somebody, do you want somebody that doesn't share values? No, but you need somebody. I'll give one all the time, Jim Abel. All right? Who's going to win that district? It's a +2 Democrat district. People beat him up. He's got an environmental arm, right? He's a pro public union guy, right? He's with us on every core vote that we have to have. And that brings the gavel forward, and that allows you the power to be able to do the things. And people beat me up for the last 6 years. Well, you guys didn't do enough. Well, we had just the Senate. Why, you know what we did? It's like everything we talked about today. That's having a Jim Abel. That's having a guy that you would never consider your vote in any way, shape, or form. So the hard part is, and the reality is, investing the time and going out and being able to get the really good candidates takes a long time. Partly, it goes back to the foundation. Having the cities, counties, townships, school boards that we've been sure they share our values. So we have somebody that has been proven, has that voting record, even at a township level. Not that you say it, but did you act upon it, and are you have the ability to govern well for the district? Right? Not all decisions are easy. Hell, it's not. Even at a township level, you get that vetting, and that's where the Democrats end up with a pipeline of really highly qualified candidates all throughout the state. So there's a whole host of things
We can
that.
expect you to do your job, but we have a job to do too.
Yes.
Right.
And
But we're gonna bust our back. We're gonna bust our tails, Bill.
We're not doing it.
Everybody in this room is.
Yeah, everybody is. So, and again, there's going to be some tools. We've got to get them out there. We're doing everything we can. Guys, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much. I'll be here.